The night the warning surfaced, it didn't begin with explosions or sirens. It began with a quiet message sent through intelligence channels, a message that immediately made its way from federal agencies to local authorities across the American West Coast. Inside command centers and law enforcement offices, a single question began circulating: what happens when a distant war suddenly reaches the edge of American soil? Because while the conflict between the United States and Iran had been unfolding thousands of miles away, the consequences were no longer staying overseas. At the center of the storm was Donald Trump, the leader who had ordered a series of aggressive military strikes designed to cripple Iran's military infrastructure and send a message of overwhelming force. For days, the strategy appeared clear: apply pressure, dominate the battlefield, and force Tehran into submission. But wars have a strange habit of refusing to follow political plans. Instead of collapsing, Iran responded with defiance. Retaliatory attacks began spreading across the Middle East. Drone strikes, missile launches, cyber threats, and regional proxy activities started appearing across the geopolitical map like sparks from a growing fire. Then something unexpected happened. The war crossed an invisible line. An internal alert from the Federal Bureau of Investigation warned that Iran had allegedly explored the possibility of launching a surprise drone attack targeting locations in California, potentially from an unidentified vessel positioned off the American coastline. The report did not confirm an active plot. Officials emphasized that the information came from an unverified tip and that there was no immediate or credible threat. But in national security, even the possibility of such retaliation is enough to trigger concern. And suddenly, the distance between war abroad and safety at home felt much smaller. Across California, law enforcement agencies quietly reviewed contingency plans. Security teams began monitoring coastal activity more closely. Intelligence analysts examined maritime traffic patterns along the Pacific. Publicly, officials tried to calm fears. State leaders stressed that there was no imminent threat and that the alert was largely precautionary. But inside the intelligence community, the situation was being taken seriously, because the idea itself represented a shift in the conflict. For decades, wars involving the United States typically unfolded far from its own shores. The country's vast geography and powerful defenses made direct retaliation difficult. But modern warfare had changed the equation. Drone technology had spread rapidly across the world. Small unmanned aircraft, cheap, adaptable, and difficult to detect, had become one of the most disruptive weapons of the 21st century. Militaries, militias, and even non-state actors had begun using them to strike targets once considered unreachable. Iran, in particular, had spent years investing heavily in drone warfare. Its unmanned systems had appeared across multiple regional conflicts, from the Persian Gulf to proxy battlefields throughout the Middle East. So when intelligence suggested that Iranian strategists might consider using similar tactics against the United States itself, the warning could not simply be ignored. And that is where the pressure on Trump began to intensify. Because the conflict he had launched was no longer confined to distant deserts and foreign military bases. Now it carried the possibility, however uncertain, of retaliation against American territory. Inside Washington, political reactions quickly divided along familiar lines. Supporters argued that the president's strategy was working. They insisted that the strikes against Iranian infrastructure had severely weakened Tehran's capabilities and demonstrated that the United States remained the dominant military power in the region. Critics saw something very different. They believed the administration had underestimated the complexity of confronting Iran, a country with decades of experience in asymmetric warfare. Instead of direct battles with superior forces, Tehran's strategy had often relied on indirect pressure, proxies, cyber operations, economic disruption, and long-distance retaliation. In other words, the war was never going to be simple, and now the risks were spreading. Within military planning rooms, strategists began examining a series of uncomfortable scenarios. What if the conflict expanded beyond the Middle East? What if Iranian retaliation targeted American allies? What if cyber attacks struck financial systems? Or what if, however unlikely, a symbolic strike against U.S. territory became part of the conflict's escalation ladder? These questions carried enormous weight, because modern warfare is no longer limited to armies meeting on battlefields. It stretches into infrastructure, digital networks, global markets, and psychological influence. A drone launched from a distant vessel would not need to cause massive destruction to achieve its goal. Sometimes the objective is simply fear. And fear, when amplified by global media and social networks, can travel faster than any missile. Meanwhile, Trump continued projecting confidence. When reporters asked whether he was worried about possible retaliation on American soil, he brushed the concern aside. He insisted the United States remained secure and emphasized that the military campaign against Iran had already inflicted devastating damage on its capabilities. To supporters, that confidence looked like strong leadership. To critics, it looked like denial. But behind the political theater, intelligence agencies were continuing their work, tracking signals, reviewing satellite images, analyzing communications, and trying to determine whether the warning represented a real danger or simply noise within the vast ocean of global intelligence. This is the hidden world most people never see. Every day, thousands of analysts sift through fragments of information that may or may not represent genuine threats. A suspicious message here, a satellite image there, a tip from an unknown source. Most of those signals turn out to be nothing, but occasionally, one becomes something far more serious. And that uncertainty is what keeps security agencies awake at night. For California, the situation carried its own unique symbolism. The state is not only America's most populous, but also home to some of the world's most important technology companies, financial centers, and cultural landmarks. Any threat directed toward it, even a speculative one, instantly commands attention. Yet state officials moved quickly to reassure the public. They repeated the same message: there was no immediate danger, and the alert was simply part of routine intelligence sharing among agencies responsible for protecting the country. Still, the psychological impact lingered. Because once the idea enters the public conversation that a distant war could reach American shores, it becomes impossible to completely erase. That is the nature of modern conflict. Battles no longer remain confined to geography. They expand into perception. They spread through headlines. They echo through social media. And they shape how millions of people interpret events unfolding far beyond their own borders. Meanwhile, across the Middle East, the war continued evolving. Airstrikes struck strategic sites. Regional allies repositioned their defenses. Diplomats worked behind the scenes searching for any pathway toward de-escalation. And throughout it all, the central question remained unanswered. Had Trump launched a campaign that would ultimately force Iran to back down? Or had the conflict entered a dangerous cycle of retaliation that neither side could easily escape? History offers many examples of both outcomes. Some wars end quickly when overwhelming force convinces the opponent to surrender. Others spiral into long confrontations fueled by pride, fear, and the refusal to appear weak. The United States had experienced both. And Iran, with its complex political system and long history of resisting outside pressure, was not a nation easily forced into submission. Intelligence analysts had already warned that even large-scale military operations were unlikely to collapse the Iranian government or eliminate its ability to resist, which meant the conflict could last longer than anyone originally expected. And the longer it lasted, the greater the chance that its consequences would ripple outward, toward shipping routes, toward global energy markets, toward regional alliances, and perhaps, if the warnings proved true, even toward the American homeland. For now, California remains calm. The waves continue to roll across the Pacific. Cities buzz with their usual rhythm of traffic and neon lights. Millions of people go about their lives unaware of the quiet security planning happening behind the scenes. But somewhere in intelligence databases and military briefings, the warning still exists. A reminder that in the modern world, wars no longer stay where they begin. They travel, they evolve, and sometimes they come far closer than anyone ever expected. Because once the machinery of conflict begins turning, even the most powerful leaders on Earth cannot always control where it leads next. And that is the reality now confronting the world. A war launched thousands of miles away. A warning issued to one of America's most important states. And a question hanging over the future of the conflict itself. Has control truly been lost, or is this only the beginning of a far larger story?